Welcome to Tracing Your Family Roots. My name is Arlene Sachs. This is Jim Bartlett and Israel Pickholtz. They're both our guests today, and they're both very knowledgeable in DNA and the various things that go along with it. And what we're going to talk about today is projects. I'll let you start by explaining what a project is.
Okay. When DNA first came into we started using DNA, long before that we had people that had surname groups, and we had one, my surname is Bartlett, and we had a surname group that started on a Roots Web email list. And we talked about Bartletts on that list from the early 1990s. For years and years and years, traded stories about our research, our lines. We had various different lines. We didn't know if they connected or not, but we divided up into different groups, and everybody talked on the email list about different aspects of the Bartlett research. Some from New England, some from Virginia, North Carolina, Georgia, all over. And this went on for years, and we pretty much exhausted much of what we could find in the research and everything like that. And in 2002, based on my own line, I had a Bartlett line that went back to Fauquier County, Virginia. I had a friend named Bob Bartley who had a line that went back to Culpeper County, Virginia, to his ancestor, John Bartley. And we were both looking for our ancestor to these two people who were contemporaries at the time. And we found 3 or 4 different likely suspects in colonial Maryland and Virginia. So Bob Bartley and I decided that I would start a Y-DNA project. The Y-DNA goes from male to male to male, and it follows the surname. So my surname to my father, to his father, all the way back to this Thomas Bartlett in Fauquier County, Virginia, in the mid-1700s, and we had this, and he had his back to his John Bartley in Culpeper County. So we had one candidate in Richmond County, Virginia, who left a will who named it Thomas and a John, but they were both Bartlett. But we thought, could it be? So he and I both did our DNA, and our DNA came back as an exact match, an exact Y-DNA match. So we were related, and based on that, we dug further into the records, found that his will gave his property to his oldest son, John Bartlett, and after he died, John Bartlett of Culpeper County came back to sell some of that land. And so we went back to Culpeper County to find John Bartlett, and there were no John Bartletts, no Bartletts at all in Culpeper County, but lots of John Bartley records. And we said, this must be it. The DNA matched, and subsequent to that, we had lots of other people that did the DNA project, and we've found a lot of other Bartlett lines too.
Now you started yours before DNA too, didn't you?
I started working seriously on my family's genealogies about 20 years ago, and I was not doing the Pickholtzes because the Pickholtzes came from East Galicia, and it was our impression that there were no records. At some point, a number of things happened together, a number of people who were looking all at the same time. I got together with Yaakov Laor in Israel and Ephraim Pickholtz in Israel, and the 3 of us started going after the Pickholtzes in an orderly fashion. We decided this can't be more than 1 or 2 families. The name is unusual and uncommon, so anybody who has ever met one will remember. So we started collecting everything we could, and we have been running ever since then with the Pickholtz project. We've located probably everybody who had the name, and we're trying to put everybody together. They boil down to 2 towns, and I am 95% at least certain that the 2 towns are connected, although the Y-DNA does not match. I think that the mother of one town couple belongs to the other town's couple family. And we've been working on trying to put the families together where we go back to 1800 with several of those families. We're trying to see how they fit together and how some of the more recent families who don't go back that far fit with them. We're using DNA to do that.
Wow.
So,
In our case, we have subsequently, on this Thomas Bartlett line, he named 5 sons in his will, and we have now gotten DNA from 4 descendants of 4 of those sons, all male line descendants. We have 13 people that have
Wow.
tested out of these 4 sons, and all of the DNA is an exact match with a very unusual DNA. It's an E haplogroup. Most of the colonists to the Americas were R1b haplogroup. This was an E1 haplogroup, and no other Bartlett that we've ever found had that DNA. As more and more people from our email group found male relatives to take the Y-DNA test, we got more and more, and as we speak right now, we have 23 different Bartlett lines, and the DNA tells us they are enough different between these lines that they don't relate for over 1,000 years.
Ooh.
So we're talking about 1066 or
Yeah.
thereabouts. Back way before surnames were born, how do you get all of these people with the same surname when
yeah.
you know their common lineage goes back over 1,000 years? And I can tell you stories about several of those in there.
There's another kind of a project, which isn't the surname project, which is the haplogroup project. Do you want to comment on that at all, or explain what it is?
Yeah.
I should also say that the projects are generally run through Family Tree DNA, but yours was before that.
No,
Or no?
I was Family Tree DNA started DNA for genealogists, for
Yeah.
consumers, in about 2000. Might be 1999,
Yeah, it was.
2000 time frame. And I didn't get on it until the year 2002, but they're up to over 500,000 people now. My kit number is 5690. So
Yeah.
the first 6,000 people, I was within the first 6,000 people. So that was in the early days of doing this. And as we grew and more people were tested, we have about 2/3 of the people, of the 23 groups in the Bartlett Project, are this R1b haplogroup, which is the kind that most of the people in Great Britain, in the UK, would have now. And so these people were colonists and from Great Britain, from England. Another, about 1/3 of them are the I haplogroup, which is normally connected with the Vikings. I have one haplogroup which is G and one that's E, and I'm the E's. The E's, as a haplogroup, the E's came out of Africa, as all the humans did, and they were in the Tigris and Euphrates River, Iraq, 10,000 years ago. 5,000 years ago, they were in the Balkans, and so you might ask, how does my Great Britain ancestor, the Bartlett line, come from DNA that was not in England at that time? But the Romans invaded England, brought people from the Balkans to be part of the militia in between 44 and 400 AD, and they stayed there. And then later on, they were just part of the British population. And so a percentage of them, a small percentage, are this E haplogroup. And they have various people that have taken on these haplogroups, even with different surnames, to try to trace back how far they go, and are they related maybe 500 or 1,000 or 5,000, 10,000 years ago.
Well, I think that's why the haplogroups are so important, because, especially for Jews, the names don't go back terribly far.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to, try to get matches, people have different surnames. Your Pickholtzes are, well, you're only back to 1800. But beyond that, brothers could have different surnames when they first signed names. So doing only surnames doesn't work too well for the Jews. Whereas if you go do the haplogroups, you know that there has to be a match. It doesn't tell you how far back, but there has to be.
Not only we didn't have them, but we didn't think they were important even once we had them. That was something that was imposed upon us by the Goyim, And we didn't want, that wasn't anything that everybody took seriously to begin with. Okay, my haplogroup is an R, which Jim just said is a European group. It is not a typical Jewish group. In fact, both of the Pickholtz lines from both of the Pickholtz towns are RM269 groups. And there's some serious study being done on them, which it's not my study, so it's not my place to tell the story, but that explains the history of our particular families. Now, another thing that's worth mentioning is there's an organization called the Guild of One Name Studies, where it's based in England. It is a very not Jewish group, but I'm a member. And I spoke to them a month ago in London, together with the Jewish Genealogical Society of Great Britain. And they sponsor all kind of programs and magazines and so on based on people who are doing one-name studies. Now, Jim doesn't want to do that because once you sign up, you are accepting on yourself the requirement that any Bartlett that shows up, you have to go and do his work. So he doesn't want to do that. I don't have that problem because
you'll take on any
because there aren't any others right now that we know of.
Actually, I'm outreaching right now as we speak to Great Britain and any place that has Bartletts. We started out with colonial American Bartletts, but we will accept any Bartletts now, and in fact encourage people from other countries that have a Bartlett surname. And in our project, we accept Bartleys, Berkeleys, Barclays, any name that has in fact been confused. And through DNA, we've basically teased this out and found Berkeleys that use the name Bartlett. We found this Bartley line to this day really should have been a Bartlett, but it was Bartley.
Well, I think so much of that happened because not everybody knew how to spell. Somebody wrote down what they heard and just passed it on that way.
That's exactly right. It's whatever they heard.
Jews ran into that much more because as they came into the country or left Europe, the people didn't understand the Eastern European names at all or the pronunciations and wrote down something very weird sometimes.
They wrote down what they thought they heard. Yeah.
And because they changed them deliberately in order to fit in with the societies that there were.
Once they were there,
It's the traditional story that they say that Chayat, who was the tailor, had a son in Russia named Portnoy and a son in Germany named Schneider and a son in England called Taylor or Needleman, and they're all the same name.
Yeah.
They're just adjusted locally for whatever the...
So that's why your haplogroups are really important, I think, for Jews to look at. But as you said, the Bartley and the different versions of it is more or less the same, except they sound a little bit more alike than the Schneider and the...
But the truth teller is the DNA, and the DNA can tell you if you don't match on DNA, it's absolute proof that these two people don't match. If they do match, you have to do a little bit more genealogical work to figure out how it fits in. We had an interesting case in our project. We had all of these people on the RootsWeb mail list that were descendants of Bartletts and researchers, heavy researchers. And there were 4 women on there who descended from 4 brothers that were born about 1800 and went back. And so they were studying that family like crazy. And when I started this project, they all said, oh, me, I'll get a brother, an uncle, a cousin, or somebody, my father, to test. And they did. And the 4 answers came back. 4 of them were exactly the same, and 1 was significantly different. Okay, so they went back up and to the families, and eventually they figured out this one guy, he was born one spring, and the summer before that, the story finally came out that the neighbor's farmer's wife got sick. So Mama went over there to take food over to him and to her and to change the bed linens and stuff like that. And 9 months later, this kid was born. And I said, okay, what's the name? And I won't say on television what the name was, but they told me the surname, and we went to that surname project, a different project. And Family Tree DNA has almost any surname you can imagine. They already have lots of matching DNA for those names. We went back, and there it was, exactly the same DNA.
Whoops.
As this, and it wasn't a whoops then. We knew exactly what had happened.
But nobody... Sometimes it's better you don't know all those family secrets.
I have a fellow who didn't want to test because he was afraid of privacy, and when he did, he didn't sign the paper to allow himself or us to see his results. And eventually his sister said, on my instruction, are you worried you're going to find some kid you don't know about? And then he signed the paper.
Well, it's very important for us, and there's an ethics paper that we have been promoting among genetic genealogists and DNA, that you should caution anybody that you try to talk them into a test that there's the potential for a surprise.
Yeah.
Somebody could knock on your door and say, I think I'm related to you, or you could find out you yourself are not related to somebody else that you thought you were related to, like your dad or your mom or a grandparent or something like that. This happens a percentage of the time. So if you take a test, you have to be aware that that's a potential.
Yeah, I guess that happened more often than we want to give credit for.
Well, I have a friend who had a cousin do a test, and it didn't come out the way they expected it. And the cousin isn't terribly interested, and she's debating whether she should even tell him.
Yeah, he might be better off.
He didn't ask. I think she's at the state now. She says, if he asks, then I'll think about it.
We like to say the DNA doesn't lie. The records can lie. There's lots of records out there that aren't what they should be.
Most of them seem to. You find, if you just go by the records, there's so many mistakes in them, and people lied about their age, and
there's all kinds of things. But
everything.
One of the genealogies that are out there, like on Ancestry and other places, we have the Bartletts, and my line has now been proven to come from Richmond County, Virginia. Across the river from Richmond County is Essex County and Spotsylvania County in that area. And there was another Bartlett family there, and they had a Thomas Bartlett a generation earlier, who had a son William, and a tantalizing clue that he had a son named Thomas Jr. And so many, many people, based on that evidence alone, have said that my Bartlett, a generation younger, is that Bartlett, Thomas Bartlett mentioned there, and they've linked them together, and they're on all these trees on Ancestry.
But they're not. This
DNA, proven by 15 different people, is an R haplogroup, and mine's an E haplogroup. An E and an R haplogroup cannot relate to each other for over 10,000 years. Okay.
Through the fathers.
So don't go looking for any records in Essex County and in Richmond County to try to link these two families together.
Something he said before that's so important. Getting a no answer is really a positive, because it tells you stop looking there. It's
stop
not
looking
going,
there. That's right.
It's not going to happen.
And what you're trying to do is just trying to force that answer that you want to occur. And it actually saves you a lot of time. And we did that in the Bartlett Project, these 23 lines. We have a very famous Bartlett that signed the Declaration of Independence, Josiah Bartlett. He was the governor of Rhode Island eventually, okay? And everybody wants to be descended from this signer of the Declaration of Independence. Well, only one of those 23 lines can have that. The other 22 lines cannot have that.
Do you have a lot of intermarriages between the Bartletts?
We have, between the different lines, I've not found any between them that I know about. We have lots of cousins who married cousins within the lines. So in my own personal case, from this Thomas Bartlett that lived in Richmond County, Virginia, I know of 14 different cousins that married each other in my line. That's nothing compared to what Israel has for his line with endogamy, but it does give me various areas of my DNA that it's hard to figure it out, because it could be one or the other. So it could go back on two lines.
You're managing the Pickholtz one on Family Tree DNA? Or?
I am, absolutely. I have several projects. I have a separate project for my grandmother's family on my mother's side, and one for one of my great-grandfathers, and one for one of my great-grandmothers. I have 5 projects that I manage right now. The Pickholtz project is the large one.
Do you want to explain a little bit about what either one of you do as a project manager?
I don't do what they want. They set up the projects for people to do serious research and so on. I have set it up as a matter of convenience so that I have all my kits under my thumb. They're not watching this, right? So that I'll have all my kits accessible and I can get at them easily. And that's not what they did this for.
I have over 400 people that have joined the Bartlett Project. There's only about 150 of those, or 200 of those, have done Y-DNA. And I've opened my project to anybody that is a Bartlett connection for which mitochondrial would help, and they could do mitochondrial DNA. They don't even have to be a male Bartlett to do that. And I've further opened it up to anybody that is in a descendant of a Bartlett line is encouraged to join my project with autosomal DNA.
Do you have to approve them?
No, I do not. I have the ability to throw them out.
Yeah, that's where I left it as well.
Yeah, I
So
have the
far,
ability.
there are not that many of them who join on their own that I need to.
I encourage people to join, and I say, I'm an administrator, I can look at your kit, I can help you. And I have a few people in my kit, I hope they're not watching, the family tree DNA is not watching, who do not relate to Bartlett's at all, but they're friends of mine. And I say, join my kit, join my project, and I can look at your kit. An administrator can look at all the kits, and we're under a solemn oath not to divulge the information of anybody else, but I can then look at their kits. And as Israel has done, and as almost anybody can do now at this time, with autosomal DNA in particular, you can say, I want to run a family project, okay? And they don't advertise this a whole lot, but you can run a project and then you become an administrator and people's kits come in, and I'm telling you, if you're the one doing the work, it is a whole lot easier to have one place with all these kits listed, and you can click on anybody's kit and look at it and compare, do the same thing as if you were that person, except change the name and the beneficiary or something like that, than it is to log out of yours and log into another kit.
This is especially true when they're sending you notices every week about your matches and you want to go and look at them. I've got 90 kits. They send me dozens of match notices every week. I can't be bothered to log in and log out and log in and log out.
Well, that's one of the problems that Sid sees, that he tells people when he sees it, when they get the notice that there's a match, write to them, join my group so I can look at this stuff, and they don't. And why are they bothering doing the DNA if they don't want to bother joining a project enough to
ask
to
a
match
better
something?
question: why do they do it if they can't be bothered to write their ancestral surnames, which is 30 or 40%?
If they know.
And I'll give you the answer to some of those, and you have them in your project and I have them in my project. I've asked people to join my project who are tangentially connected to the Bartlett line or to my line. And I'm only interested in that part that is the Bartlett part.
Yeah.
So then they have some other, they could be descended from Rumpelstiltskin or somebody on this other side over here, and people will write to me about that, and I said, that's not my interest, and I'm not going to do the research for you on that. And then they get annoyed because I don't have time to research do the research for all the people, the 400 people that are in my project. So these people crop in, and we just have to deal with it because they're there. They help somebody, when they came in. And a lot of the people that are in these projects are not the people that care about DNA. They do it because I bought the kit, or you bought the kit, or you requested somebody.
Don't tell people that I pay for some of these kits.
I've paid for my share too. You always encourage people to do it. You want their buy-in.
Sometimes they won't do it otherwise.
Right.
I have a fellow named Ira, and I get a note from, he tested because I said I need some people to test. I did not target him specifically. And I get a note from somebody who matches Ira and doesn't match any of the other Pickholtzes in the neighborhood. So I said, Ira, tell me about your mother and your grandmother. He said, no, I'm not interested.
That's it?
He says, for 20 years, you've been doing this work. You've been sending out summaries a couple of times a year. You've gotten my records. You visited my parents' graves and my grandparents' graves. Out of the respect for the work that you've done, I took the test, but I don't care what the results are. There are several. I have several like that.
Yeah.
I found a half first cousin who's a generation older than I am, and talked to him and was glad to meet him. But then I asked him to take a DNA test, and he said absolutely not, and hung up the phone. Okay. 6 months later, I wrote him a Christmas card or an email and talked to him. Oh, I'm so glad you called back, Jim. I am your cousin, and I'll do the DNA for you. Okay, and he did, and he doesn't care at all. He's never even looked at the kit or anything, and I run his kit. So half of that is on my Bartlett line, and he's my first cousin. The other half of the stuff, I don't know.
Well, I know
the good news is hardly anybody ever asks about it.
I know somebody here, and I don't want to name any names, definitely related to someone in London. And that guy, and I went up to the guy in London, and he said, I know this guy that's name is very similar. He says, oh yes, I know. and get him to take the test. I know he's related because I have his uncle on my list, so I'm positive they're related, both from Lithuania via South Africa. So we went to see the guy, talked to him, nodded very nicely, never did it.
Oh yeah.
Just won't do it, and I don't know why.
I've bought probably a dozen kits for birthday and Christmas presents. They made it. A DNA kit makes a great present for somebody at any of these times because it brings the family together and you're talking about it and it lasts for long. It costs $100, for a kit.
Nice gift.
So it makes a good gift. But I've got 4 of those out there, still out there after years and years and years, and the people, I'll get around to it, I'll get around to it, and they never
I gave
do it.
one as a birthday gift a year and a half ago, and it has not yet been sent in.
Yeah, my son hasn't done his. If you're listening, you're on my list. So it's hard to get people to take the test.
Yes,
and for various reasons. And I tell them, if you're nervous about anonymity, we'll put you in as John Jones. It doesn't make any difference. I don't care who your parents or grandparents or great-grandparents are. All I care is that your DNA came from this ancestor that's common to both of us.
I, on the other hand, do care who your
You do,
grandparents and great-grandparents are
Because
I'm working in a smaller time frame.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's about all that we have time for. I really appreciate you taking the time to come here on your short time that you've got in Northern Virginia, Israel. And Jim, I really...
You didn't say that I'm from Jerusalem.
Okay, he's from Jerusalem.
I'm from Jerusalem.
Now you didn't want me to say that.
You're from Pittsburgh and you moved to...
I've been living in Jerusalem, in Israel for 43 years.
Yeah.
So thank you very much for coming, Jim.